In this video, you're going to learn how to draft a knit sloper. After you have gone through chapter 27 in your textbook, chapter 27 talks about knits and their stretch factor. And as you found out in that chapter, not all stretch knits are alike. Some stretch a little bit, those are your stable stretch knits, and the other extreme of that is very stretchy or super stretchy stretch knits, and those usually have lycra in them. And you need to adapt your pattern accordingly to how that knit is going to react. In chapter 28, it discusses that there's actually 3 different types of knit foundations. Draft 1, which is the one that we will be doing, is the Dartless stretchy knit. So no darts in this. All the fit comes from the actual fabric that collapses to the body and fits snugly. Draft 2, though, is for firm draft stretch knits, also referred to as double knits. These foundation patterns would include some darts. They're actually just a smaller form of the typical foundation or the basic set of foundation patterns, but they're adjusted slightly for the firm knits. And then a cotton knit oversized t-shirt type top. These are the ones that fit loosely on the body, and that's draft number 3, but we will concentrate on draft number 1. These are used to make any kind of knit tops and or dresses that don't have a seam line necessarily at the waist. And in order to develop these, you must have completed the seamless torso foundation. That was another lesson earlier in this class. The book does refer to the chapter that covers that draft that you must have first. Then, as all foundation or sloper patterns, there's no seam allowances on these. Stretch knits are usually sewn when using an overlock or a serger machine with 3/8 inch seam allowance. So when you get done with your working pattern and you're completing the design pattern, you would put that seam allowance on if you're using this kind of sewing machine. If you're going to use a lock stitch sewing machine, you would do the typical 1/2 inch for the major seams, 1/4 inch for any curved ones. But we're going to concentrate on building this sloper. It has you actually begin with the back. So I'm sliding this aside, showing you what you're going to need to complete this is your front and your back torso, seamless knit torso patterns. Let's adjust the camera to try and get them all in there. And you will also need your sleeve from the basic pattern set. So the first directions have us begin with the back sloper. And we are going to need our mechanical pencil. All right. I am going to trace almost everything here. Let's adjust this. Actually, I'm going to come down from this underarm around the hip, mark that down across the bottom, up center back. So continuing up center back, trying to keep it in our camera frame. Here we go. I need to get my neck edge. We will mark the dart space out to here. And then in the textbook, we are tracing down about, here we go, halfway to the bottom of the curve. Now we need to shift this whole piece up. That way the dartless knit fits a little tighter under the arm. It shifts up 1/2 inch. So I'm going to mark that on my paper, how far up I go. I need to stay in line with center back. And then from about the point where it matches back up to that stitching, I will finish drawing this lower part of that armhole and down to the side. Okay. The other thing that may come important is back at my original spot is just marking the waist. So everything lengthwise from the back neck to the waist stayed the same distance. We just made this fit a little tighter under the arm. Okay. The other thing that we can do is actually eliminate our back shoulder dart. If you follow the directions, it will have you square off of this line. And whatever that distance or take up excess of that dart is what we're going to come in on our shoulder. So we're taking that expanse and moving it off of the edge here. You will need your French curve to blend this curve back into that. We will be eliminating all of these things. Okay, no more darts in there, notches for that. So that is our back. It also has us label this shoulder X. There we go. And on a stretch knit, because we're not going to have our darts here in the waist area, the knit can be taken in on the side. So we're going to pull this in. The book recommends 1 inch. All right. And then we will be blending it in and out here. I actually should be using my, my hip curve, but I'm going to kind of do it in stages there with my ruler. And then same thing over here. Again, I probably need my hip curve, but I didn't have one handy just yet. Trying to blend this curve back out to that point. So we came in 1 inch at that waist level. And here's my waist. Might give that reference there. Okay. And that is on page 633. Moving on to the next set here is our front torso. Place the front pattern on top of this back copy here. Placing it, aligning the hip and center lines. So there, and the hip is the lower level here, and center back. Now what we're looking for or to see is this curve here. In this case, mine actually do match up. I'm going to draw this lower neck curve right here. But if I had a little bit of staggering either below or excuse me, or above that line, that new point would be labeled Z, and we would strike a line between those and balance the shoulder at the center mark between the two. The book shows a little bit more discrepancy between both of them. That's okay. And here I can readjust this shoulder according to that one. But depending on how your sloper, torso sloper was drafted, you may be a little bit different, so maybe 1/2 inch or more, but in this case we were pretty close. So we've got that. The book talks to you about how you align that. Now then, separating the front and back patterns. Well, at first I'm going to actually need to trim this out at the edges. I'm going to use the back neck. Move this one up here. The higher one to establish first the back piece, then we will trim that away for our front sloper. Okay, following my new shoulder line. Okay, and following the new armhole curve, slightly raised here. And then our new side seam that comes in 1 inch. There we go. Blending back out. Okay. So we've got that. Now from this copy, we will be transferring that onto your oak tag board for the back. You can use the oak tag or even poster board will work. We'll trace around that and get ready to have that cut out, and then I'll show you the front. I'm going to go ahead and pause this and pick it back up after I've got that traced in the back ready, and pick up with the front. All right, we're picking back up with where we left off, and I had left off with having traced out the back of our stretchy knit foundation onto my oak tag. And I also went ahead and cut that out. Finished out the last of our instructions that follow over onto page 634, which is to cut it out, label your Dartless stretchy knit back, and then to take a measurement of my armhole curve and jot that measurement down. I just put it on my sloper right on that edge. It's easy to reference then for later designs. Now, that one's done. I finished out some of my writing. I do need to add the size. And continuing to transfer over my mark for my waist line is handy as well. So we'll set that aside and get another piece and prepare to use again this same piece to draft our front. Remember, we had laid our front sloper to borrow the neck curve, and we made an adjustment to match up our shoulder there. Well, now that we have traced the whole outside of the back, we're done with it. We can remove and discard this part of the curve so that now we will be using the front edge of that, which is a lower curve for the front neck. And then the other thing it has us do is trim out 1/8 of an inch on the curve here in the front. And if you think about how the body moves, our arms move forward and across our body in a much broader range of motion than it ever does to the back. So we're going to need our ruler. It said in the instructions to trim out 1/8 of an inch. So I'm giving myself a little bit of a mark there. And analyzing my diagram, I can see that it is really just kind of blended back into the curve here and back into the curve here. So, whoops, that shifted on me. Okay, so we're just getting rid of this narrow space right there. Let me trim that away. Getting your scissors on there, tapering it out, trimming that out, and whoops, not even in the frame, and blending it back into the underarm curve. So we got rid of that little 1/8 of a sliver on the curve. Okay, so there's our front. Now the other thing that we need to also do is flip this so that the front then is oriented as all our other fronts with center front down the right hand side. Now with this piece I will be able to trace around it. I do need to use my front torso again to establish where the bust point is, and I'll do that by aligning my neck edge and making a mark for that bust point so that transfers through. And the other thing I will transfer through is my waistline. I will go ahead and do that off camera and come back and join you and show you the completed one for that before we move on to the sleeve. All right, so I am back with you here after I have traced out the front adjusted working pattern here. And the other thing that I included, okay, I traced it. I already cut it out of my oak tag and or my poster board. Then I borrowed back my torso sloper and marked my bust point through so that I've got it on this one, and then drew my bust circle just in case I need that as a reference. Let me just show you a little trick. I used a piece of paper. The default is 3 inches for the radius for this circle, and I have a punch hole on one end and I have a cross mark. That cross mark I did have to find where that matched up on my bust point, which is a little bit of a trick in itself. But then once you have that established, you can put your pencil in the other mark and then spin it around to draw your circle. It keeps it a constrained distance from your central point and draws a circle in the case you do not have a compass. Works like a compass. All right, I've also marked this, our Dartless Stretchy knit. That is our front. Here is our back. The other thing that I have marked is our waistline. Now the back I still had my notches, so I went ahead and transferred those. My front, I am not putting the notch on just yet until I fix my, or set up my stretch knit sleeve. Once I do that, I will match the sleeve and work it up into the curve and give a matching notch mark for my front and my sleeve at the same given time. The back though, since these are established, I will make those marks on the sleeve according to walking it through that edge of the pattern. But this is the front and the back to get you started. In a separate video will be the development for our sleeve pattern.